In this video, we will continue to talk about inserting objects in Maya. And in the last video, we saw how we can import from an external website like renderpeople.com or other similar website. And we saw how we can create a little scene. Now in this video, we're going to continue. So I'm going to go to File and Recent Files. I'm going to open up the last scene and I'm going to proceed from there. So in this video, we are going to do some more examples. Let's go to Open Scene on the File menu, and here you can see that Maya is gonna do a best guess, which means that it's gonna guess automatically what we are giving it. So we could give Maya, for example, a Maya file directly, which is going to be a Maya scene, or could be OBJ or another format, could be a 3D format, could be an audio, could be an image, or a vector graphic project. Depends what you need to import here. You can see the many different formats. So you can let Maya guess, or if you know what you are importing, you can select a particular format or file type, for example, FBX or OBJ. Now, if we go here in the edit preferences, you can see the import presets or options that you can set up if you want. We saw the preference panel in the previous video. You can get there anytime you want to customize something. Let's go to import. And well, you have two ways you can place objects into the scene. You can import, and you can click here and you have additional options for importing. And this is usually what you do when you get files from another software, which could be any software capable of exporting in the particular formats. And again, you can see here we still have best guess, so this means that Maya is gonna guess, or you can indicate, you can point out a particular file type. Now, in the previous lesson, we didn't import, we actually opened directly the scene file, but here you can see that we can do the same thing and we can import both the 3D model and the animation, which will be within the 3D model. We can import and we can add to the scene. So the difference between opening directly a scene, for example, from renderpeople.com, which we did in the previous video, and importing is basically that when you import, you are actually adding something to the actual scene. And this is what we're going to do here. So we're going to add more elements, more objects, more assets into this current scene here. So if I say import here, I'm going to import stuff from another scene, and I can do that also using Maya scenes. So I can import in other formats, but also in Maya scenes, and this is pretty small. This was the text right there. It was the first that we did in the first video, and it's smaller than the rest of the scene that we created in the last video. So first thing I'm gonna do here is I'm going to go in the attribute editor and go to the parameters that I need to scale it. So yeah, bevel plus was it's the attribute panel, and here I can increase, for example, well, not only the size but also the bevel, the extrude distance. I can place caps or not place caps, depends what you need to do. And here I have some more attributes, so you can go through. You can see there are many tabs for this. It's a little bit more complex than the average object. You can also click on these little icons to go inside and get into more specific parameters. This is another way you can navigate and manage the parameters in the attribute editor. So right now, just gonna go to scale to do this real quick and easy. Just gonna use the scale command on the left sidebar, and I can change here, for example, the text. So this means that this is still a parametric object. So when you can modify an object with the parameters, in this case with the attribute editor, you are talking about parametric modeling or parametric object. So you can see here I can change the bevel width and the bevel depth and the extrude distance. There you go. So find the correct balance or the settings that you like, customize your object, and that's it. And I can always go back here and change the text as many times as I want. So what we just did is practically merging two scenes together. And because this was not an external or another file format, it was still Maya format. And so we just imported and merged two scenes together. Now, let's work on this scene a little bit more and do some other examples on other important features and commands. So I'm going to show you here some additional things about the polygonal objects. So we saw how we can create here some primitives that we can find inside the software ready-made for us, but we can also go to Windows and General Editors and go to the, well, that's the attribute editor right there if you want it from here. But if you go, and this is another important one, channel box, and then we have content browser. Tool settings is important for poly modeling, and you also have some additional panels. But I'm going to show you here that if we go to content browser, here we can find something a little bit more interesting than the usual primitives. You can see I have here like animals, dinosaurs, and some more complex 3D models. So, well, I think that depending on the version of Maya that you have, this is going to change a little bit. In some versions, you have more than these animals here. And these are actually used to practice the sculpting. You can find this also in Madbox, which is similar to ZBrush, to work with the sculpting. And again, check in our channel if we have guides on this software too. Or you can write comments and questions. You can ask for assistance if you want, do some sculpting. And here we can see that we have also other assets inside the content browser. We have some motion capture that we can use. These are all FBX files containing animation. And in the rigging part, we have models which are rigged, so you can use them to test the animation. And later I will show you some examples of the rigging part and the animation of a character. And yeah, it's gonna take some time here. There you go. These are the source images. Now remember that every time you have a nice 3D model with a nice texture, a nice material, which this means that that object has textures. So these are the textures right here, and they always need to be together with your project. We talked about that in the previous video. You can also increase here the zoom so that you can see a little bit better, and you can see that these are models taken from randompeople.com as well. And these are static people, always from randompeople.com. And again, they always come with textures. So you can see that you can bring them directly from the website, or sometimes you find them in the software, in this case in Maya. And if I click on source images again, it's always takes some time to load, because I think these are really big textures in terms of pixels. They have a really high resolution, so they can look so realistic. And then we have sculpting pose meshes. So you can see that these are less complex than the humans, but these are examples of what you can actually model in Maya using polygonal modeling and especially soft polygonal modeling. So you can work here and create hard surfaces and soft surfaces. And here again, you have some vehicles, weapons, but this is all kind of toy looking. And then you have sculpting stamps, which can be used in the sculpting process. In Maya also you can sculpt. You have some sculpting tools. They are not the best in the market, but they work pretty good. For that you should see ZBrush. This is the top software in brushing and modeling and sculpting if you need to do character design. And the alternative, it's another alternative is Mudbox, which is from Autodesk. And Mudbox is pretty similar to what we can do here in Maya, but it's a different application. It's also cheaper, so you can have a look to that if you're interested in sculpting. Okay, now let's get back in the scene and let's get some of these 3D models inside just to create a more complex scene. So I'm going to go to the content editor here and choose some of these content. Like I could get this organic model of the dinosaurs, and be careful because sometimes they have also animation, and the animation frame rate could be different from the scene frame rate. So well, we're gonna talk about animation and frames and frame rate later, so don't worry about that right now. We just need the 3D models, and this is my T-Rex right there. And I'm also going to increase the size of the plane, which is still being a parametric object. So I can always go there and change the width and the height. So the 2D dimensions of this plane. And I can change also subdivisions if I need more. And let's go back to the Windows and general editor and content browser, and let's add something else. So just to show you two different types of model, let's go in some hard surfaces like vehicles, and I'm going to add here this like sports car. So you can double click, you can click and drag. That's gonna import it, and you can see that you always be in the middle of the world. So you need to move it aside, and look at that. In this particular model, we actually have more than one object. So we have the car itself and then the wheels. So what we need to do, and you can see they are all separated there in the outliner. So always check what's happening in the viewport, but always have an eye on the outliner because that's your best manager tool there to manage your scene and see what's happening in terms of okay, what I have imported and how it is imported. So you can see that this is all ungrouped. These are all let's say independent objects. So I think that a best practice here is to create a group so that we don't get lost, so we don't lose wheels on the way. So let's go to edit, and here we will find also the group command, which is Ctrl G, or you can click on the square and see if you have some extra options. I always do that because I like to find out if I have some interesting option, but in this case nothing so much. So I will hit Ctrl G and create a group, or go there and do it manually by going to edit and go to group. And well, you can make some tests. For example, the pivot could be something that you already want to change, but we will talk about the pivot also later and how to modify that later, so don't worry about too much about these settings right now. Okay, let's create this group. You can see now that I have a group. I can name it so that I can find it later on more easily. I'm gonna call this car, and you can see that now the car is the empty parent, and inside I have all the children, which will be the parts of the car. So we talked about creating hierarchies previously. This is another way, except that the father here, which will be the group called car, it's empty. It's not an actual object. And here we can change the transform attributes, which means we're going to change position, rotation, and scale, just as we did before. And remember that these are absolute values. So you have two types of values. Usually you have absolute values and local values for the object. And also we can change the pivot later. These are all values concerning the pivot and its relation to the absolute values of the world. Well, these are things that we're going to explain a little bit more later. So I'm just going to rotate the car here, and I'm going to place it somewhere else. And also be careful about the scale, because if it's not uniform, you're going to change the aspect ratio of the object. Now also be careful when you move to select everything and not just one piece of your group. So I'm gonna select directly the group in the outliner and move it aside a little bit. So again, another really useful use of the outliner to select directly the group and not just one part of a group. Okay, so let's continue here with the group selected. Just gonna move it a little bit here. Let's go to the attribute editor, and you can see down there you have pivots. So this is the parts concerning pivots, and you also have world space and a local space. So local refers to the object. World refers to the scene, the overall Maya scene. So when you are working with an object, you have two types of coordinates, let's say like that. One is referring to the object and it's local, and the other one is world. But the pivot is right there, so you can always locate the pivot by looking at the move, rotate, and scale gizmos. They're always gonna show you where the pivot is. So let's go here, and we need some extra panel. So I'm gonna go to Windows and go to the tool settings. Now this is a really important one, so I can click this and dock it somewhere, because I usually keep this in my interface. So I'm gonna stick it right there. Now every time it turns blue, you can dock it somewhere. In my case, I will do that. You can see here on the right. I want to place it right there next to the outliner, and I'm going to make it smaller just to not get too much in the way. And here you can see now I am selecting the move tool. So what I'm seeing here is move settings, and you can see there axis orientation, and there you go. So I can switch now from the outliner, select the object, go to the tool settings, and decide here what I want to do with that particular object and with that particular command, which is going to be the world orientation or parent. This means that I'm switching from local to world or object. So you can see there how the arrows change according to what I select here. And you have other types of selections if you want to try. Depends on what you're doing basically, but right now we are just working with the object and the world. And you can see now that I can move these from, well, the Z and the X-axis are not the same of the world. You can see that there is a different movement there. So if I want to move this car straight, this is not really handy, because I need to move it in both axes, and it will never be as much as precise as the object orientation, where I can use directly the Z. So it's pretty useful to know how to switch from the object mode and the world mode. And here you have the edit pivot and reset the pivot. So this means that I can edit my pivot as well as I can edit a standard object. I can move it. You can see there that I'm moving the pivot only right now. So when you switch to edit pivot mode, you are only working with the pivot. You can move it, rotate it, scale it, and this is now in custom mode. Now, as also we saw in other situation, you can help yourself with the 4 views working both in 2D and in 3D. This is gonna be easier for you to place it in a particular position. So working with the 2D views is gonna be more precise. And also with the snaps, it's gonna be even more precise. Again, we can change the pivot position as many times as we want, and then we have those information also in the attribute editor. So we're gonna move the object, is gonna refer to the position of the pivot. Now we will go back to pivot later. Just want to go back now to copies. Now we saw that we can create a copy by doing Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V with the keyboard. This is gonna create a copy, and this is the result there. And in this case, when the copy will be created, it's gonna be inside a group. Now another way you can copy is to move or transform an object from the pivot holding the Shift key. That's gonna create a copy, which is not gonna be a group, but it's gonna be a standard object. Or you can use Ctrl+D to duplicate. Now these are different ways that you can create copies. So sometimes it's better to copy with Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V and create a group, and other times you can just copy out the object. Now if you want to make multiple copies, you can also go to other commands here. So if you go to edit, you can see that here we have cut, copy and paste, and then a duplicate section. So standard duplication is Ctrl+D, then so it's just similar to the copy and paste, but it's not going to create a group. And then you have the duplicate special and the duplicate with transform. So you can go and select, well, let's delete some of these. And I'm going to get these first, well, I'm gonna just use one and again create a copy. So I can do Ctrl+D, and that's my copy there. Or I can just move and hold Shift. This is another way that I can create copies. So, and if I then click Shift+D, which is gonna do duplicate with transform, is gonna duplicate the object, and it's gonna duplicate also the transform information. So it's gonna duplicate both, and it's gonna create, you can see, multiple copies which will be equally with an equal space between them. And you can see that I can not go more further than that. So I need to fix the camera clip, which is one of the option with the camera. You can see here I opened up the spacebar. The hotbox by holding the spacebar, and then I can go to view, go to the camera attribute editor. Well, you can go also directly to the camera attribute editor right there, and by selecting the camera in the outliner, and I need to change the, not the near clip plane, but the far clip plane. I need to extend that. Now this is kind of a, you can see now I can see more copies. Now this is used to set a limit to your scene, because if you have huge scenes with a lot of complex objects, that's gonna slow down the viewport. So this is why the clipping is used sometimes. So again, here I'm holding Shift and moving this. You can see I've missed the wheels there. So always be careful what you're selecting To be sure, I'm gonna select it from the outliner, hold Shift, move it, and it's gonna create a first copy. There you go. Again, be careful to hold Shift and make a first copy. And once you do that, you can then, or well, you can use Ctrl D or another way you can create copies that we saw before. And then, okay, let me just delete that. And I'm gonna move it, create a copy. And then let's go there and, well, sorry about that. Let me just create another one. And I'm going to do now Shift D to create multiple copies again. So it's gonna copy. I'm gonna seek the copies there until I reach the far clip plane, which will be the limit that I set for my scene. Okay, let's select now this pillar, and I delete it, and I want to recreate one. So you can see that I clicked on the cylinder primitive, and it gave me the same pillar that I created in the last scene. So it's always going to remember your last option when you create an object. So I'm going to deactivate the round cap. I'm going to add some subdivisions to make it look more like a cylinder. And I want to show you some more additional options. These are pretty handy when you do pillars for architecture or when you need to do some multiple copies. So instead of duplicate with transform again, which is the one that we already saw, we want to use now duplicate special. Now, before we do the shortcut key, well, let's go and create a simple copy here. Okay, so we can do here the duplicate special. So you can see here that I have a more complex panel of options that I can do. Now, first of all, you can choose copy or instance. Now, we did copies so far. Instance, it's a little bit more advanced because it will maintain a relation with the original object. So if I change the original, it's going to change all the different copies that I have created from that. So this is instancing. And I can also choose to group under parent and set a number of copies. So I can say, yes, I want 4 copies. And now I can set the spacing between them. Using, for example, the X translation, the X axis, I can say, okay, I want 2 meters for each pillar. So 200 units, which will be centimeters, and then hit on duplicate special. So I created 4 copies. You can see there, they are perfectly spaced and they are aligned. So this is a perfect combination when you need to do things like pillars or beams or anything that needs to be equally spaced. And you can see that if I change the original, for example, changing the subdivisions, it's gonna affect all the other copies. So this is the difference between a standard copy like the ones that we did until now and the instance. So instance, it's pretty handy because I don't need to go through all the different copies later if I change my mind, but I just need to get one and change the attributes, and it's going to change it for everyone. And I can continue to make duplicates special on copies. So I'm going to set here 200 in the Z. Well, actually it's going to be, yes, in, or I can set also 2 dimensions. So I can move it and copy it using both the Z and the epsilon. And that's, you can change the number of copies there. And you can change the scale and the rotation. And let's see what happened here. Let's close. You can see there that I've copied both. on the X and on the epsilon and on the Z, and it created this, and I think also on the X. So I copy it in 3D, so in 3 direction. So be careful what axis you choose depending on your need. In this case, if I want to make, let's say, a series of pillars for architecture, I probably want to move it only on the Z this time. So I'm gonna go back to duplicate. Be careful there. So I'm gonna set the X value to 0 and also the epsilon value to 0. I'm gonna just use the Z. I'm gonna make it negative so that I move in the opposite direction and say apply. And there you go. So this is kind of a bottom floor, so the first floor for an architecture. And then I can create a pavement or something. And here, anytime I change my mind, I can get rid of some subdivisions, change the shape basically of my pillars and or columns. I can make them become more columns and less pillars. Okay. Now let's get back to this object that we made earlier, which was kind of a little table, or yeah, could be a chair or a table. Let's think that like a table, and this is kind of a simple seat. Because I want to show you another way you can copy out using arrays or duplicate special. Well, in other software they are called arrays. So I want to move and copy that seat around the table. So here I can see that I have a, well, I'm gonna make this look more like a table. So I'm gonna scale this using the parametric width and height, setting precise measurements, because we do know that we are in centimeters, so I can create easily a table setting the right proportions and dimensions. And this is going to be my seat. Now you can see that the pivot, as usual, is set inside that object. It's in the middle of the object. So let's move in 2D so we can help ourselves. And let's go to the pivot. And this time I'm going to change, so I'm going to edit the pivot. I'm going to place that pivot in the middle, not of the seat, but of the table, because I want to create copies which will go around the table, just as usual in reality when we have seats around the table. So if I rotate here, you can see that I'm rotating now using the pivot around the table and not on the object. So if I hold Shift and rotate, you can see that I can create copies rotating around the table, or I can go to the Shift D, to the duplicate special, and yeah, I'm gonna call that seat just to not to get confused, and get now to the edit and duplicate special, and I'm gonna use the rotate. So I'm gonna set this to 90. So this means it's gonna create a copy each 90 degrees around the epsilon, and set 4 and say apply. And that's it. So I've easily created what is called a polar array. Okay, let's stop now and see you in the next video.